Hi, and welcome to Hiss and Tell, a cat behavior and more podcast, hosted by me, Christina Wilson, animal behaviorist. Today we're going to be talking about pattern games, which are structured exercises that create predictability and reduce stress for your cats. Whether you have a shy cat who needs a little encouragement or a high energy cat who struggles with impulse control, pattern games can help. Stay tuned as we break down what pattern games are, how to introduce them, and why they work so well for our feline friends. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hiss and Tell. I am your host, Christina Wilson, and with me today is Beth Brown. She is a certified cat behavior consultant and Control Unleashed instructor. Welcome, Beth.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Today we are going to be talking about pattern games. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, about your education, about what it is that you do?
Yeah. So I started my behavior journey in the shelter, which is a super fun place to start it if you ever have a chance. It's a whole different world. But yeah, basically worked towards my CCBC, got that during a snowstorm actually, which is weird because I live in Houston. So it's not a normal event.
Yeah. Of course not.
But yeah, I left the sheltering world and started doing private consulting. And I think at the first Lemonade conference is where I first saw Leslie McDevitt and fell in love with her. She's amazing. And it's just kind of been a fun little roller coaster ride since, doing cat and dog behavior consults and doing workshops for other professionals and for shelters, and it's just a lot of fun to hang out with like-minded people.
Yeah. So we can hear your dogs. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what pets you have?
Yeah, if you can't tell from the bark, that's a Chihuahua. I've got two of those, Baby Cthulhu and Senua, and they do use a cat tree. So they're basically like my resident cats.
I have never heard of dogs using a cat tree. That's so funny.
Yeah, at my office desk, the only chair I have is an exercise bowl. And like, they want to be in my lap, and it just wasn't compatible. So I got them a tree next to my desk, and that's how we manage that, and it works out pretty well, actually.
Oh, that's cute. I love the creative solution. That makes sense.
It's kind of like the pink tax for humans. Like, just because it says women's razor doesn't mean I can't use the men's razor instead.
That's absolutely true, and gendered products are very stupid. So
yeah, so are CC products. Because like, you go to a pet store and you find a dog toy that you think your cat might like, just get it.
Yeah.
It's still a toy.
Absolutely. I mean, all our cats love to play with tennis balls, which are traditionally like a dog toy. So, whatever.
And my dogs are in love with catnip toys. So like, great. Scent enrichment. Let's do it.
Do they have like a reaction to it as like cats do, or they just like the smell?
They just like the smell, and I think the taste. But I mean, they'll eat cardboard, so.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Can you tell us a little bit about what pattern games are and how they relate to cat behavior and enrichment?
Yeah, so pattern games, as Leslie McDevitt invented them, are basically just like little training games where you insert a little bit of predictability into an unpredictable world. So all the pattern games are very predictable. They're very like formulaic. You do action A, action B, action C, repeat kind of thing. So it's just a very predictable framework that you can kind of insert into generally any situation as needed. There's caveats, of course, but that's the general hope for them, I guess.
Right.
Which, if you look at the 5 pillars of a healthy feline environment published by the American Association of Feline Practitioners, one of the pillars is they need safe and predictable interactions with humans. So pattern games just seems to fit that bill really well. And they're really easy to teach to cat owners, which is kind of a key component, because like, the books were written for dogs. We expect to train our dogs. You get a dog in your household expecting to do some kind of training with them. So like, it's an easy sell for dog owners.
Right.
For cat owners, it's a little different. We don't adopt our cats thinking, I'm going to train this cat to do whatever, but it does help build their confidence. It helps them elicit new behaviors. It helps them acclimate to new spaces if they have that cognitive enrichment item to kind of focus on.
Right.
I already forgot where I started this thought, but that's
Okay.
why I loved pattern games for cats, because it just seems to tick off every box that you need to check with a cat.
So how are they different from clicker training for people who may be like, oh, well, I've already done clicker training with my cat. Like, is this the same thing? Is it a different thing?
Yeah, we use clicker training with pattern games. Most pattern games, you are going to train an operant behavior of some sort. So like a behavior that you have to teach the animal.
Right.
And that they offer willingly. So, I mean, you do use clicker training. I think when most people hear clicker training, they think like tricks.
Right.
We're going to teach the cat or dog like fun tricks to do. But I mean, yes, that is what you do with clicker training. But every trick can have a function if
Yes.
you train hard enough. So like these are just tricks that you're teaching that already have a function.
Right. How can pattern games sort of help improve a cat's confidence or sense of control? Can you speak to that a little bit?
I would love to. It's kind of a whole
I know, it's like a whole, give me 30 minutes on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so clicker training in general, training in general just helps build a relationship between trainer and trainee, educator and learner, however you want to phrase it, human and animal, although,
excuse me,
does it go the other way around? Yes, often it does.
Yeah.
So like that in general, just as a base activity you can do with an animal, just tends to help build confidence in general because they're getting a lot of positive associations with eliciting behaviors. If you reinforce it properly, then you will get more of those behaviors because that's how reinforcement works. So that in general just tends to build a more confident animal. But when you have a purpose around it, like with pattern games, I like to, especially with cats, say that they're really good for like helping them acclimate to new spaces, which is traditionally hard for cats. Because you can like, a lot of these pattern games use context clues that will help the cat like filter out kind of the background noise.
Right.
Of like new space, new sounds, new sights, whatever it is they're experiencing. Just kind of helps them filter that out a little bit and focus on something that is familiar, which allows them to, in an unpredictable situation, because they don't know the space or don't know the person they're with or whatever, those context clues tend to help them just filter out the unfamiliar.
Right.
And focus on the familiar and start to elicit behaviors and start to build a relationship and rapport with whoever they're with. So it just kind of works. Like we could get into the nitty-gritty of the like behavior science behind it. Am I the best person to do that with? Maybe not. I forget words a lot, so the technical terms tend to not be.
Okay.
But like that in general, just being able to give them something to focus on and filter out all the background noise so that they can process that slowly, just tends to help build a more confident cat and a more confident handler, if we're being honest.
Yeah. And I mean, I always tell clients and just friends that like it's generally we're training the people rather than just the cats. So, it really is like a training of both people going on. So I know that pattern games can help reduce behavioral issues like aggression or fear-based reactions, especially when your cats are traveling like you just talked about or going to the vet. Can you speak to that a little bit more or talk about how listeners could use pattern games in those contexts?
Yeah, so one of my favorite ways to use pattern games is to help cats get comfortable entering a carrier. So that's something a lot of owners struggle with, is like the carrier only comes out once a year, if that, and it's only to go to the vet. So it has negative connotations associated with it just right off the bat. And there are things you can do to kind of help mitigate that. Like if you're going to start fresh and do some carrier training, maybe get a new carrier so we don't use one that's already kind of poisoned, so to speak. So there's some easy management things you can do to kind of help set yourself up for success. But the pattern games, I find, really helps the cat make choices about what they want to do, because most pattern games are going to be in control of the cat, meaning like they do a behavior and that prompts the human to respond, not the opposite way around. So by setting up like if you ever hear me talk about pattern games anywhere ever, I'm gonna mention Super Bowls. It's just my favorite game.
I
It's
remember you saying that
so
before too.
versatile.
Yeah.
Like I
Well,
did an entire talk at Pounce just on Super Bowls. And I could have gone for longer because it's just such a versatile game. And the basic concept is you set up stations
mm-hmm.
for the cat to go to. When they arrive at a station, there's a treat there. They eat the treat. After they eat the treat, they perform a behavior. Usually it's looking up at the human is the operant behavior they do. And then that prompts the human to go forward to the next station and set up a treat. So everything is within the cat's control. They do not have to move forward unless they want to. And the human will not move forward unless the cat tells them to. So there's
Right.
no pressure, which is, I mean, a huge thing because a lot of the time when we're talking about carriers, we're talking about humans like picking up the cat
Yeah.
and essentially shoving them in there. So this takes out that human interference, if
Mm-hmm.
you will. Like now we're playing more of a supporting role instead of a Godzilla role, if you will. And that, I mean, that alone takes so much pressure off of the cat and so much anxiety out of the situation because the cat feels like they can control the situation now, which makes the carrier in and of itself just not that scary of a situation anymore, especially if
Right.
you've done your homework and you've like set the carrier up to be really cozy and maybe there's a
Mm-hmm.
warm towel in there and maybe there's like some catnip or whatever or a favorite toy or what have you.
Yeah.
So it just kind of takes a lot of anxiety out of the situation and allows the cat to just do what they want essentially. But like at the end of the day, because we've done this training, they're also doing what we want.
Yes.
It's just they don't know that's what we want.
Yeah.
It's what they want and we're just like there in a supporting role.
Right.
I mean, you get them to buy in and do it themselves, it just tends to go a lot smoother.
No, it absolutely does. And I feel like I say this on almost every episode, but it is so important to carrier train your cats, especially I think because we've all seen what just happened in California with the fires that and I think two episodes ago was the disaster and emergency preparedness episode. It is so important to be able to have your checklist, however, have everything ready, but also be able to get your pets into a carrier relatively quickly without chasing them around and scaring them and having to wrangle them so that you can evacuate if you need to quickly. And so having them carrier trained where they're happy to go in a carrier, like in our house, our cats are insane. And if we just put a carrier down, they all compete about who can get in it because they think it's just a fun toy and they're like, no, it's me, I want to get in, I want to go, so it's a great idea to really have your cats super carrier trained, whether it's through using Super Bowls like you just described or a combination of pattern games and just leaving your carrier out and making it really enticing. Sorry, I went on a real carrier training tangent.
Those are good tangents to go on,
I know.
though.
I feel like every episode I'm like, carrier train your cat.
I mean, everyone says about crate training dogs, like, this is just the equivalent in cat world. And it's equally valid in both realms.
It really is, but I feel like it's just kind of out there in the lore that like cats hate carriers and it's just this is just how it's going to be for cats is that you're just going to have to chase them around and like jam them in a carrier to get them to the vet. And it doesn't have to be like that. Like it really doesn't. Like they may not like going to the vet, but you can get them to like their carrier. You can do things for the car ride if they have motion sickness, if they're really anxious, there are medications that can be helpful. And then you can actually use pattern games, as we discussed, at the vet to help acclimate them to the situation so that they're going through a scenario that is familiar.
Yeah, especially if you have a really supportive vet who like play the pattern game with your cat and with you.
Yes.
Like that is such a marriage of like amazingness that it's just beautiful to see when it happens. Wish it happened more.
Yeah.
But I mean, time is hard to get sometimes.
It absolutely is. It is. Can you talk a little bit more about Super Bowls? Because I think for people who are listening to this and who have never heard of pattern games and don't know what they are, could use a little more explanation about what are the bowls in Super Bowls? Like what's going on? Are you using real bowls? Are you just putting a treat on the floor? Why is it called Super Bowls? What's happening?
Yeah, like with most pattern games, there's a lot that you can leave up to interpretation. Like I mean, just like when you're talking about cats and body language and stuff, like there's a
Mm-hmm.
general rule of thumb, but every situation is going to be a little different. So feel free to use creative license. I think that's my favorite part about pattern games is like you learn the basics and then you can just get creative with it,
Right.
which is so important. Like you have to be flexible in training. But so the basic premise of Super Bowls is the way it's taught with dogs is
Mm-hmm.
yes, you have like a line of bowls or dishes or whatever. I tend to use snuffle mats because if you can add enrichment into a situation, that's
Mm-hmm.
never a bad idea. So you have a line of like usually 3 to 6 bowls and you space them out pretty evenly, usually in a straight line. But again, you can get creative with this. Um, you start at one end of the bowls. So, like if the bowls are numbered 1 through 5, you
Mm-hmm.
start at number 1. This is another reason I like to use snuffle mats because you can get them in different colors.
Yes.
You like go blue to pink, now pink to green, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just a lot easier. But you start at bowl number 1, you drop a treat in the bowl. Whoever you're training eats that treat. When they look up in your general direction, does not have to be full on eye contact, especially with a cat, because
Yeah.
that can be quite
Yes.
intimidating. When they look up in your general direction, the human moves forward to the next station, so bowl number 2,
Mm-hmm.
and drops the treat in, and then hopefully cat follows. If they wander away, you probably are not using a treat that they like, or something like they're getting closer to something that they just don't want to get closer to, and
Right.
so they choose not to. But in theory, you drop a treat in bowl number 2, the cat follows, eats that treat, looks up at you, you move to bowl number 3, cat follows, eats a treat, etc., etc.
Right.
When you get to the end of the line, so when you're at bowl 5, the cat looks up at you, you just turn right back around and go back to bowl 4. So it's kind of an up and back and forth motion, up and down.
Right.
It's a pattern.
Yes.
Repeat pattern.
And
Um,
how do you end that? Like how do you wrap up the pattern game?
I usually like to get back to bowl number 1
Mm-hmm.
and then put like a couple extra treats in that bowl. And while the cat's eating that, I go collect the other bowls to kind of signify like this pattern is done. This is
Right.
no longer available. This is just not what we're doing anymore. And like if you end with a little jackpot, like that's the payoff at the end of a hunting session or whatever,
Yeah.
right? So cat can go groom and sleep and do whatever they want after that. They
Yeah.
should feel pretty satisfied.
I would hope so. After
yeah.
all this. So, how would people who are in a multi-cat house, not necessarily a 13-cat house, but just maybe a house that's more normal with like 2 to 3 cats, how would they handle starting to use pattern games? Are there specific patterns that are better for multi-cat households? How do you deal with multiple cats?
This is a question I get asked literally every time I talk about pattern games because I mean it's a valid question. Like
Right.
who has a 1 cat household? Like
Yeah.
those are unicorns. Which hopefully there are actually a lot of those because working on a project where we need several single cat households, but that's a topic for another day.
Yes.
But I mean, I'm going to give the behavior answer. It depends. It really depends on the cats in question, on the abilities of the person training, on the environment that you're in. But generally speaking, like you can train 2 cats at once just as, well, maybe not just as easily, but like easily, like you can train 1 cat. Never forget that animals are so much better at reading body language than us humans are.
Right.
They will pick up on every tell. So if you incorporate things like eye contact, again, like soft eye contact, doesn't have to be like we're making direct eyeball to eyeball contact, but like I'm looking in your general direction.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a cue that can kind of help clue the cat into who you're working with. You can get really good at just like doing 2 things at once. So you can have, if you're doing Super Bowls, for example, you can have 2 lines of bowls
Mm-hmm.
and you're in the middle and the cats just kind of go up and down. Hopefully they go at the same rate.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's going to get a little messy.
Yeah.
But you can work that into the pattern. Like we don't move forward until both cats look up.
Right.
So you can adjust it accordingly. One of my favorite things to do is whoever I'm working with, like I'll do the pattern game on them and they're my main focus.
Mm-hmm.
And then if another cat comes around, like I might stick out a finger and like do target training with them on the side, real low. So there's a lot of different things you can do. You can also, like if you don't want to train 2 cats at once, you can set the other cats up with an enrichment exercise, like catnip on the floor. It's a really easy situation to just set up. I mean, the consideration there is that like the cat you're trying to work with might be more motivated by that catnip
Yes.
on the floor than the treats you have. So again, you have to plan accordingly based on your situation, but you can also just ignore the cats you don't want to work with. Like they'll get bored and wander off eventually if you
Right.
don't reinforce them for being there. So that's always an option. I find it hard to ignore cats though.
Yeah.
So
Same. Yeah. It's very hard to ignore them. And also, there's a lot of known food stealers, at least in our house. So
yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah. And if that's an element you're working through, I mean, there are pattern games for that. So maybe that's one you work on.
Right.
And like you just do a lot of voluntary sharing. And that's what you train because that does involve two participants.
Right. Can you speak a little bit more about that since we touched on it?
Yeah. So voluntary sharing, super simple pattern game. I say that like they're not all simple.
Well, for people who are just hearing about this and starting it, it may not be that. So,
It can sound complicated.
Yes.
But you start out with, lack of a better descriptor, I'm going to say the aggressor cat.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying this is an aggressive cat because I never label a cat as aggressive. But if they display aggressive behaviors around resources, whether it's a human, a toy, some food, some water, whatever, that's the one you want to be like the act participant.
Mm-hmm.
And you basically teach them a start button behavior. So a behavior that they can do when they want something to happen. A lot of the times with dogs, you'll see people using a chin rest for that start button. So the dog offers a chin rest and that prompts the human to do something.
Mm-hmm.
With cats, I like to do like a paw tap or maybe eye contact or like touching a button or something. But you basically teach that one cat that one behavior. And then down the road, when they offer it, you're going to put a treat in front of them and then a treat in front of a neutral station.
Mm-hmm.
So like, kind of like with Super Bowls, you can use bowls for this. You can also use literally anything else. Again, I like to use snuffle mats with cats, I'll just use a shallow dish or a plate or a coaster. And that way we don't have to worry about their little whiskers. But you basically, cat offers behavior, you offer them a treat, you offer a neutral station a treat. Repeat until the cat is like pretty good and they're not going after the treat at the neutral station. When you're at that point, you're going to switch it up. So the cat offers a behavior, you offer the neutral station a treat, and then the cat. So now we're learning a little bit of impulse control, a little bit of delayed gratification, which can be really, really helpful in resource guarding situations, because if we don't feel the need to go directly towards that resource and we can hold back a bit, that tends to avoid a lot of conflict.
Right.
And when the cat can handle that, like we're not going after the treat being offered to the neutral station, we're just waiting for our own, then you can add another or dog or child or whatever else, and then repeat. You might have to go back a step, like offer cat A, the one that's eliciting the behavior, a treat first, and then cat B, and then switch it when we're comfortable. But the general concept here is that you're teaching the aggressor cat that they are in control of this resource and this interaction, but on your terms. Like they have to allow the other cat to have it too.
Right.
But they're not just allowing it, they're directing it. So it's only because they have offered a behavior that the other cat gets the resource, and then they get the resource and they get the same thing.
Right.
So it tends to kind of curb those impulsive behaviors that lead to a lot of conflict. It tends to build rapport because like both the cats are there in that situation having good things happen to them. So we're having a positive association. So there's that classical conditioning at work. And just like anytime you're training, it tends to make the cat a little more confident.
Yeah.
And a little more, because like that's what resource guarding is usually, is it's based in insecurity.
Right.
Of some sort, or fear or whatever. So if you're getting rid of that emotion behind the behavior tends to clear up too, oddly enough.
How funny is that?
Right?
I know.
When I'm not scared, I don't do scared things.
Yes. So how important is consistency when you're doing these pattern games with cats? Like how often do people need to do them or practice them with their cats?
Consistency is always going to be important in training. That being said, like you have a life to live and you're allowed to live it.
Right.
And we all deserve breaks, whether it's from training or work or whatever. So training does not have to happen every day, but if it's something both you and your cat enjoy, that is something you can work into the daily schedule, because routines do tend to help cats feel confident in
Right.
general. That predictability again. But also keep in mind, training should never be a marathon.
Yep.
Like it's a sprint. You just want to do like 2 minutes at a time and then we're done. So it shouldn't be a full-time job.
Yeah.
If you're working with anyone who makes it a full-time job, I hate to cast scorn on people, but that's a bit of a red flag. A little bit.
Yeah. I feel like the cats would just leave too. Like,
yeah.
After 5 minutes, I feel like they'd be like, bye, I'm over this.
Yeah. Like we've been doing the same thing for 5. I'm bored. There's catnip over there and there's a bird out the window and I just gotta go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like consistency is important, but also, I mean, keep in mind that your life is also important. Quality of life matters for everyone in the household.
That's an important thing to remember.
Yeah. And training should be fun. If you're having an off day or whatever, like you're not feeling good, you're in a bad mood, your cat's not feeling good, just don't do it that day. Yeah. Find something else that you find comfort in.
Yeah, that's good advice. So speaking of that, how do you think pattern games like strengthen the human-cat bond? Or do you think they do or not?
Yeah, I definitely do. Starting with pattern games is one of my favorite ways to bond with cats at a shelter. Because, I mean, those are cats I don't have a long relationship with, but you need to have a good rapport with in order to, like, help them find their next goal. There's easy to do pattern games like Up and Down, which is literally just like you put food in a dish or on a coaster or on a whatever. And when the cat looks up at you, you put another one down so that they're looking down at the treat and then looking up at you. That's the up and down action. It's basically like a stationary Super Bowls. So obviously I love it. But like that builds a rapport because now all of a sudden your interactions with that cat are not scary. They are predictable. Right. The cat knows exactly how you're going to interact with them. They're going to look at you and then you're going to do a behavior and you're not going to do anything before that. And the behavior tends to be something that they find pleasure in. So, and if they don't eat the treat, that's not the reinforcer for you. So, what do you think?
Do you think, and I don't know, maybe shelters are doing this, that using pattern games, like you said, in shelters could be helpful when potential adopters come through if they're taught a simple pattern game like Up and Down to initially introduce them to cats, and then that would maybe even get cats that are labeled as less social to be more interactive with potential adopters?
No, that makes so much sense because yes, pattern games are such an easily transferable skill. Like, how long would it take you to teach a potential adopter, like, hey, when the cat looks at you, drop a treat in the bowl?
Yeah.
Like that's a pretty easy instruction to follow. So you don't need to learn behavior theory. You don't need to know about clicker training or get any certifications or take any classes. Just literally when the cat looks at you, drop a treat in the dish. But that also, like, the cat on the other end of this is like, wow, this new person that just walked into my life is like already under my control. They just keep giving me treats whenever I look at them.
Yeah.
I find this very predictable. I know, like, I've done this with other humans, so this human must be good too because the other humans haven't eaten me, so why would this one? And like interactions with cats are what get adopters to adopt.
Exactly.
Cats.
Yeah.
No one's going after the shy cat in the corner.
Yeah.
And some people are. Some people specifically look for that. But like, how many adoption stories have you heard where they're like, well, this cat just walked right up to me and I knew it was the one. Or this cat came and crawled in my lap and I knew it was the one. So like if you have this interaction to do with the cat and it's really easy for both the cat and the human, you're already forming a bond there. Like it doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can just be a moment. And that's how a family is made.
Yeah. I really wonder if any shelters are doing that or if any shelters would be willing, because I know shelter work is so difficult to have the time and patience to not only teach the animals, but teach potential adopters. And then a study could be made about whether or not adoption rates increased.
Yeah. I mean, I hope more shelters adopt stuff like this.
Yeah.
Like if there's shelters out there that want to implement a program like this and they just need someone to kind of point them in the right direction, like Leslie does, McDevitt, the creator of Control and Leash, she does free seminars for shelters if they reach out to her. So you have a resource. If someone wants to reach out to me about cats specifically, I mean, I also work with dogs, but like, or pattern games specifically, like I'm not gonna say no. Like I'm gonna help a shelter who wants to help their animals. So I think there are people kind of across the globe who would be willing to help a shelter do this if they have the resources to do it.
Right.
And I'm not talking like tons of resources. It's just the hardest one to get. You need a little bit of manpower.
Yeah.
And that's kind of hard to get.
It is. That is the sticking point. But I think it would be something worth looking into. I don't know, just putting that out there for people. If there's any shelters, anyone who works at a shelter who's listening, who would be interested in working on this, please let either of us know. And let's see if we can do this.
A fun collaboration.
It would be. I think it would be really cool. And we'd help a lot of animals that way. So let's see what we can do.
I know the shelter that I used to work at here in Houston does something similar, not pattern games specifically, but like they do something similar.
Right.
And they've had a lot of success with it. So, I mean, that just further supports the potential hypothesis that this could be really helpful, but also somewhat easy to implement. Like it doesn't take much. It just takes a little bit of education and a little bit of manpower.
Yeah. So are there any specific considerations that people should have with pattern games when they're introducing them to like senior cats or cats who have mobility issues?
Yeah, I mean, definitely make sure the environment is set up for the learner in front of you. Because like if you have cats with mobility issues, maybe we do it in a place that has some traction for the cat, so we're not slipping all over the place. So like put down a blanket or a mat or something if you don't have carpet. Some cats are going to do better up on elevated surfaces. If your cat can't get up on an elevated surface, do it on the floor. That's fine. Like I'm always an advocate for using levels with cats and teaching them to like, let's do this pattern game on the cat tree or whatever. But like, again, that's the cats who can physically do that. Obviously, if you have like a deaf cat, don't use verbal cues, use visual ones. If you have a blind cat, use verbal cues and not visual ones. You can also, like if you have a young, healthy cat, you can always set them up for future issues and like teach them both a verbal and a visual cue and do things on the floor and on surfaces so that down the line you can transition and it's pretty easy. They're already familiar with it. Right. And I mean, I'm sure there's other considerations that need to be made. Like if you have a cat that has like CH, like make sure you're in a nice padded area and they're not like, if they fall over, it's fine. They're not going to get injured. So like maybe not up on a surface for them. And maybe with like pillows or something, or if you have a cat with mega esophagus and they need to have raised bowls, like have raised bowls. And of course, diet considerations are always going to be between you and your vet or you and your nutritionist or whatever. But like, do what you got to do to keep your cat healthy. Training should not supersede that.
Right. Yeah. We have a lot of cats who are on a weight loss journey in our house. I'll put it that way. They've become rather stout. And so I really like to just use pieces of dry food because we don't give them a lot of that as treats instead of actual treats, which tend to be a little bit more caloric. And they are so crazy for dry food because I feel like it's like Doritos for cats. Like it's just not as great for them. So they will do anything for just like 5 to 10 pieces of kibble. It's crazy. So,
not to mention like if you're on a weight loss journey and your cat will only eat party mix while training or something, like you can snap a party mix.
Oh yeah.
4 or 5 different treats. It doesn't have to be like
a whole one.
This is the way it was designed, and this is how we'll give it to you. Like, take some creative license there.
Yeah, you can make it crumbs.
Exactly.
One crumb. Yeah. So, are there any like common mistakes that you see people make when they're first introducing pattern games to cats that you could kind of steer them more in the right direction?
Yeah. So, I think the biggest pitfall I see people fall into, and this is like clients that I've coached too, because
Mm-hmm.
somehow you just always, the human brain takes over. And like when we're not
Sure.
supervised, it happen. But a lot of the time with these cat directed pattern games, so like in Super Bowls, the cat is looking up at you and then you move forward. The cat should initiate the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time, if they don't initiate that behavior, you see humans kind of prompting it and like calling the cat or gesturing or, doing something to get the cat to look up at you.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's fine when you're teaching the behavior initially, if you're doing the pattern game, you need to let the cat elicit the behavior. You
Right.
don't prompt it. Because if you do prompt it, now we're putting that pressure on them again, right? Because like I prompted you to look up at me and now we're moving forward, whether you're ready or not. So you kind of have to leave it in the cat's control. That being said, I think a lot of where we see some struggles are where humans see that as a failure. Like the
Mm-hmm.
cat's not doing the behavior, they're not doing it right. But the cat is totally doing it right. Like if they will not elicit the behavior, that is communication.
Right.
That is them saying, I am not ready to move forward. There is something about moving forward that is really just not sitting well with me. So in that case, their lack of behavior, they're not prompting you to move forward, is another prompt.
Mm.
It should prompt you to like, okay, let's pause this game for a minute and let's evaluate the environment. Are we going like, do we have the bowls too close to a scary stimulus? Whether it's the carrier or a cat on another side of a gate or
Mm-hmm.
the vacuum cleaner or whatever you're working towards, getting closer to. Are we too close to it? Are we maybe on the floor and we would feel better if we were elevated? Are we, is there like a storm happening and I didn't know my cat was scared of lightning and now I do
Right.
because she always does this and this is the one time she does it. So it gives you the chance to reevaluate the environment and then adjust. And that being said, like evaluate the external environment, of course, but also evaluate your cat's internal environment because there might be something that you need to deal with them. Like, are they in pain? Are they sick? Are they not feeling well?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that needs to be cleared up too. So if your cat is always super responsive to whatever you're doing with them and all of a sudden they are not, like start asking those questions like, oh, are you walking different? Are you eating different? Like, do I need to take you to the vet?
Right.
Basically.
Yeah. So that actually leads me to one of my last questions, which is how do you evaluate whether a pattern game is working for your cat?
You'll know if it's working if you actually get some counter conditioning happening in that situation. That being said, I think a pattern game always works. Like it doesn't fail. There's no such thing as failure in pattern games. It's just communication.
Mm-hmm.
Might not be the communication you're looking for.
Right.
Or something, but it is communication. I mean, in the same way that like hissing and growling and scratching are also communication.
Right. Yeah.
It's just that's yelling. Whereas whisper pattern games are more like we're having a calm, collected conversation about this.
Yeah.
So I don't think a pattern game ever fails. You do have to take some time up front to like teach the behavior that you want to see out of your cat so that they know what they should be offering. But I mean, that takes like one session. It doesn't take long. And it doesn't take a whole, like, I know there's that stereotype that like orange cats all share one brain cell and they're all just so stupid. But like, even an orange cat without the brain cell on that day can learn to look up and then eat a treat.
Yes.
Like, it's not that complicated. So there's a really low barrier for entry for these cats. It's really important. Because, I mean, a lot of cats are just not used to training, too. So that's a factor. But if the cat is not doing what you expect them to do in a situation, that is always going to be communication.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the human now to figure out the puzzle.
Yeah.
So if you're not up for it, like, there are outside sources that you can seek for help. There are online forums. I would point people towards a Facebook forum, but like Facebook is kind of on my no-go list.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of people out there that are so happy to answer questions if you're just like hitting a wall and you just don't know what your animal is trying to communicate. But the first person you should always collaborate with, obviously, is the vet. Like, vets are our friends. They are here to help. You are seeing your cat do more than the vet because the cat is going to be more comfortable in a home environment than they are in a veterinary environment.
Sure.
So you can now go armed with some observations, which are going to help your vet help your cat. Because if you just take them into the vet and you're like, I don't know, we're having issues, here you go, that doesn't give the vet much to go on. Whereas if you can go in and be like, hey, so usually we do training and the cat is usually super responsive, and today, like, they kept picking up their left paw repeatedly and wouldn't do the behavior. That's at least a starting off point for the vet to go with. So it arms you with knowledge, the failures. They arm you with knowledge. They arm you with observations. And you'll get better at the problem solving as you learn your cat's responses to things. Because there's going to be a different response to, like, I'm just not feeling well today versus that vacuum cleaner is just 2 feet too close to me.
Yeah.
Just don't want to go towards it. Like, you'll learn that over time by observing.
Right. That is totally true. And that gives me a good opportunity to shout out desensitization and counter conditioning around vacuum cleaners for cats, because that's another thing that, like, obviously cats have amazing hearing. It's their best sense. And so vacuum cleaners are really irritating to them because of that. But you can train your cats with desensitization and counter conditioning to not be fearful of the vacuum. They may find it annoying. I mean, I also find the sound of a vacuum annoying, right? It's loud, it's annoying. Yeah. But you can really train them pretty easily to not be afraid of the vacuum cleaner. So just putting that out there for everybody, that it is very possible. And I think I actually have a blog post about it on my website on Catitude Adjustment in the blog section about how to do it, showing me teaching, I think it was like 8 kittens to not be afraid of the vacuum cleaner at the same time.
That sounds like a fun video.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And now we have one of those little, like, robot ones for our house, and nobody even cares. And it used to, like, run into one of the cats and just, like, bonk on him, and he would just look at it and be like, pfft.
13 cats and not one of them rides it?
Steve, this guy back here who was, like, my soulmate, best guy, he passed like a year and a half ago, but he used to ride it around, and he knew how to, like, push the button on top to start it. So he would get on and sit on it and push the button and then ride it around like it was a little car. It was so funny. He's such a weirdo. But yeah, nobody does it now. They're just like, ugh, this thing again, but no one cares. So
just don't come near where I'm laying and we're good.
Yeah.
And bonk into my butt.
And they don't even care. Like, they're just like, whatever. It's going to leave in a minute. They don't care. So I don't even remember why I got on that tangent, but whatever. You can train your cats to not be afraid of vacuums. So we have a listener question for you, which was, have you found one pattern game to be the most useful in your home?
Oh my God, you're gonna be so mad at what I answer. Because it's Super Bowl.
That's
so predictable, right? Actually, it's not. Like, I love Super Bowls as a tool to teach other people. In my home, it's usually 1, 2, 3 that we're using because I don't need any props. Because quite frankly, I never have a clicker on me when I need it. I never have dishes on me when I need them. And, like, usually it's because someone is out in the backyard being a doofus, and I just need to open the door and get a response now, please.
Right.
So I use 1, 2, 3 a lot because it's more of a classical conditioning game. Mm-hmm. You don't have to teach the dog I'm saying dog because I have dogs. Animal, a specific behavior. It's literally you count to 3 and you give them a treat. You count to 3 and you give them a treat. There's more to it than that. Like, you want to have a good cadence to it because the rhythm is important. That's where part of the predictability comes in. You can change the cadence of it, like do it faster when you need more, like a higher rate of reinforcement. You can slow it down when you need a lower rate of reinforcement. You can make it operant. So you can turn it from a classical conditioning game to an operant conditioning game by having them look at you before you start counting. And there are merits to that. Like, if you're going into the vet and you're like, whoever's with me just doesn't want to approach, you can kind of be like, you know what, when you look up, we'll take 3 steps forward by doing 1, 2, 3. But we're not going to take a step until you look at me. So you get that Super Bowls kind of action there, which is why I love it. So surprising.
You need a t-shirt that just says Super Bowls
I've made some graphics before and like they amuse the crap out of me. So I made like a bowl with a cape on it and I had
Oh.
it right into a screen on a presentation. It was just so much fun. Yeah, like I enjoy a pattern game that I can do on the fly and I don't need to set anything up for.
Yeah, of course.
But like in my consults and stuff, I'm usually going to use Super Bowls because I do want people to take the time to set something up and consider all like what we're doing and really put some thought into the environment before they start training. So that serves a purpose there.
Right.
And in my life, 1, 2, 3 just tends to be easier because I'm just not going to go grab any tools.
That totally makes sense. I mean, I don't think most of us are wandering around with
Yeah.
clickers and bowls and the fanny pack full of treats all the time,
Right.
not all the time. So totally makes sense to be able to do that. So how can people contact you if they want to hire you to teach them more about pattern games? Or is there a website you want me to direct people to? If this is your time to shout yourself out here at the end.
The self-promotion bit.
Yes.
This is like the thing I'm the worst at. Yeah, so I do have a website. It's eartotail.com. EARTOTAIL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You did.
Like, did those letters go out of order? I don't know anymore. You can also email me at info@eartotail.com.
Mm-hmm.
There's also, I do have a course, as you might be aware, through the IAABC Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's designed as kind of an in-between for like, I kind of designed it for behavior consultants, but like in an accessible way. So if you're an enthusiast, a cat lover, whatever, like you should still be able to follow along with it.
Yeah.
So I do have that course as well.
I highly recommend it. I took the class. I highly recommend it, everyone. So just FYI. I'll link to it at the bottom of everything. Sorry I interrupted you.
No, go for it. I have a new class starting tomorrow, actually.
Oh.
I'm nervous to meet all the new people, but also excited.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, those are the big ways to reach me. I'm on social media, but I don't use it.
Yeah.
So don't contact me there. I probably won't notice it. And I certainly don't post anything.
Fair enough. That's absolutely fair. All right. Well, I really appreciate you and your time, and thank you for coming on and educating everybody about pattern games. Pattern games are really an invaluable resource tool to have in your toolkit, especially when managing behavior issues, but I think also just as intellectual stimulation for cats. And I know that people who listen to
human.
Yeah, yes. And for fostering that human-animal bond, I think, like, taking 2 to 5 minutes every day or every other day to, like, really spend concentrated training time with your pet is so helpful, and it's nice and predictable, and it's something they can look forward to. So I super recommend it, and I just really...
give you early warnings about, like, medical situations, too. Like, if you're used to interacting with your cat in that way and observing them, you notice that it, like, the inconsistencies or the outliers.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much. I super appreciate it. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, this was so much fun. I'm glad we got to do this.
Likewise. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review wherever you listen. It super helps. For more information and to support our podcast, check out our website at hissandtellpodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram at hissandtellpodcast. Music provided by Cat Beats.